Well, hello everybody. I'm making another cheese. I'm doing a video because this is one that I've never made before. I just tend to make videos when it's one that I haven't done before. I have here 16 liters, a little over 4 gallons of milk in a stainless steel container, and it's down inside of the canner with water. It's sitting on top of the rack that you would put the bottles in the canner, just to keep the stainless steel pot up off of the direct heat. And I'm trying to get the temperature up right now to 90 degrees Fahrenheit. I've already added a teaspoon of calcium chloride mixed into a quarter cup of water, diluted into a quarter cup of water. Temperature right now is 78.8, and as you can see, I have a new toy. I've wanted one of these digital thermometers for quite a while now. The other thermometer, the regular mercury type thermometer, works well, but they're so slow. And these things are almost instant read. It takes it 2 to 3 seconds to come up with the temperature. So I will bring you back when we've got 90 degrees. The temperature has just reached 90 degrees. Hope it doesn't make me out to be a liar now that I've removed it. Yeah, 90.1. 90.3, so it's just slightly over 90. I like this digital thermometer, and it was a long, slow process, but that's better than doing it quickly and overheating it. And now I'm adding 2 packets of direct set thermophilic culture. And if you didn't have that, you could add 8 ounces of a prepared thermophilic starter. And I have no idea how to do that, but I have the little packets of direct set thermophilic. Make sure I got all that out of there. Packet number 2. This will be the most cheese that I've ever had in production at one time. This will make my 4th cheese. The Jarlsberg, which you might have watched my video on, has now been vacuum packed and is aging in the fridge, in the cheese fridge. And I have a Gouda. I guess you saw that in one of the clips that I did not too long ago on the Jarlsberg and the Gouda together. And just recently I started a batch of Camembert, and it's also in the cheese fridge right now, and it's growing its white mold quite nicely. I'll just mix this in a bit to get started here. And now I need a quarter cup. These clangy noises in the background. A quarter cup, or approximately a quarter cup, of the milk, warm milk, to which I'm adding a quarter teaspoon of propionic Shermanii, and that is the starter that will form the eyes, the holes in the cheese, if I'm lucky and get holes in the cheese this time. I didn't get, well, I got some, but I didn't get very much in the Jarlsberg. It should have had more holes. And from some of the cheese making Facebook groups that I'm a member of, and some other comments that have been made on my video, I would say the problem might have been the thickness of the cheese. The mold that I was using made a cheese that's only 2 inches or so thick, and that might have had an effect on the holes that were forming. So I have bought a new mold, one that's used, I guess, for Edam cheese. You'll see it anyway further on in this process here, and it's for a 4-pound cheese. And I'm using well, I'm using more than 4 gallons of milk because my milk is from Canada and it's measured in liters, not gallons. So I'll probably have a 4 or 4.5 pound cheese, but it should be much thicker. And hopefully at the stage where it forms the eyes, it'll work this time. But we will see in the future here. It's a long process. This particular cheese won't be ready to cut and use until at least November. But I'm going to take you through in this video to the point where it goes in the cheese fridge for its final aging, which is at least 3 additional months, and you could go much longer than that. But my patience isn't that good. I'll be tasting it in three months after it goes in the cheese fridge. But I'll show you all of that up to that point, and then we'll do another short video when it's time to cut and taste the thing. Okay, now it is covered and it rests for 10 minutes. I'll bring you back in 10 minutes. It's had its 10 minutes to hydrate. I checked the temperature. It had dropped slightly, so I put it back in the hot water bath for a matter of seconds, brought it back up again. It wasn't even down to 89 degrees, but since I have this extremely accurate thermometer, I figure I might as well use it. Now I am adding 1 teaspoon of single strength rennet mixed in a 1/4 cup of, for me, tap water, because my tap water isn't chlorinated, it's directly from the well. If you don't have that, you could use bottled water. I'll just stir this for about a minute to mix the rennet in thoroughly. And then it gets covered and sets for 30 minutes. In the meantime, I'm going to make the brine that's needed at the end of the process here. It'll be sometime tomorrow, I guess, when you start, or late tonight, when you start brining the cheese. I saved a brine and used it several times, but the last time I used it, I thought, well, it's probably enough. It's been used 3 or 4 times. I would rather make a new one. So I'll show you that process. It's very simple. So we'll cover this, and in 30 minutes we'll be ready to cut, hopefully. The brine is a simple enough matter to make, I guess. That is a gallon, 4 quarts of just ordinary cold tap water in my case again, but if you were having city water, you've got to use something that's dechlorinated. And to that I am adding 1 tablespoon of calcium chloride and 1 teaspoon of white vinegar. Just make sure that all got in there. Stir it in a little. And 2 pounds of salt. What I'm using is called a cheese salt. I buy it from the cheese making company. Any non-iodized salt, a non-iodized sea salt or kosher salt or whatever, would do. But the advantage of using the cheese salt is that it's a very fine grained salt, so it will dissolve more readily in the water. That's basically all there is to this. I'll just keep coming back to it over the next half hour or so and stirring it occasionally until all of the salt has dissolved. And that is the brine, ready to use for the brining process. 30 minutes later, and I noticed that I forgot to take the label out. That won't be such a problem, I guess. I'll leave it there for the time being. And it has sat. We have a nice clean break. Now the curd, of course, has to be cut. I'm sure you've seen me do this many times, so I won't spend a lot of time on it. I'll make the hatch marks both directions. Once I finish this direction, I'll go across this way, is what I mean. And then I'm I'm pleased to see that this recipe says to break it up further. Instead of going down and doing these slices on the diagonal, to use a wire whisk, which I've been doing lately, and it works very well. Eventually you want to end up here with 1/4 inch, well, they won't be perfect cubes, but 1/4 inch curds anyway. So bring you back when I'm about to do my wire whisking. Now to go with my wire whisk here, just to break it up. Slowly I'll go down through turning. Hopefully be able to get that ladle out of there soon. Tried a couple of times. I could have brought it up, but I would have ended up with some very large curds that I didn't want, so I will wait until I'm finished with the wire whisk here, and it should come out quite easily then. I just checked the temperature, and it is still at 90 degrees Fahrenheit. Which is important because the next phase after I finish cutting the curds here is to gently stir. Might as well leave that ladle in there. Gently stir with my ladle for 40 minutes, and during that 40 minutes maintain the 90 Fahrenheit temperature. So I'm sure it will cool down some and have to be added back to the hot water bath at least once or twice. There are curd cutters, wire curd cutters you can buy, but something I've never invested in yet anyway. And I really like doing it with the wire whisk. This is probably the 3rd time or so that I've used a wire whisk, and I think that does an excellent job. I'm right on the bottom there. I can feel some heavier curds. Now, give me back my ladle here. Now it will be gently stirred for 40 minutes. I'll set my timer, keep checking the temperature, and that should give us much smaller curds at the end of 40 minutes. The big ones are like those that you've just seen there. When they come up, I just take the ladle and cut them up a little smaller. So, I'll see you in 40 minutes time. Well, the cheese has been maintained at 90 degrees and stirred gently for 40 minutes non-stop. And that is called pre-working the cheese. This is prior to cooking it. Now the cooking process begins. And the first part of the cooking process is over the next 30 minutes. I will gradually increase the temperature of the cheese to 120 degrees Fahrenheit. It doesn't have to be stirred constantly at this stage, but frequently, because you don't want all the curds to go to the bottom and form one large clump. So I'll bring you back in a half hour, and hopefully by then we'll have it up to 120 degrees. Well, over that half-hour period, I gradually increased the temperature, and it is now at 120 degrees Fahrenheit. And now the rest of the cooking process is to maintain the temperature at 120 and to stir occasionally for the next 30 minutes. So I will hope that it doesn't have to be lifted too many more times back into the canner. 16 liters of milk is heavy when you try lifting it. It's already at stove height here. Check the temperature right now. It's still at 120 right there now. So I'll bring you back in 30 minutes time. Well, 30 minutes later, maintained 120 and did some stirring occasionally. And now there is a test that you do to see whether or not it's sufficiently cooked. With very clean hands, I've washed my hands here. don't seem to be able to get any on the ladle to do it. There we go. Take some in your hand, squeeze it gently and form a clump, and then rub it together, and if it falls apart like that, which it's doing, that means that it is cooked. If it wasn't cooked when you did this, it wouldn't form a clump. It would just fall apart at that point. So we have cooked curds. I don't understand why I have so much floating on the top. I'll try to skim those off and use them as well or not. But the next thing to do is to let it set for 5 minutes and settle. I don't think those ones that are floating on top are going to settle. And then remove as much of the whey as you can possibly remove. And the curds, of course, then go in the mold. But you have to do it very quickly because you don't want the temperature to drop. So I'll bring you back in 5 minutes' time once I have removed the whey and ready to put it in the mold. Now, moving as fast as I can move, I guess. I want this to get cooled down. Put the curd in the mold, lined with cheesecloth, butter muslin. I don't think I've said so far in this production today that everything was sanitized, including the cheesecloth. I sanitized the cheesecloth by boiling it, but everything else I use a dairy sanitizer. There isn't any stray bacteria or whatever. And I did manage to save those curds that were floating on top. I poured off the whey through a colander. And that way any of the curds that got poured off with the whey I was able to add back. Didn't lose them. Getting close to the bottom just as well because the mold is getting full. Okay, I think we'll call that enough. Now it has to be covered with the cheesecloth. I think one layer might do it. And the follower goes on. And this is part of a, I don't think I need it right yet though. Might need it when it gets down in there further. That's a follower for the other cheese mold that I use. And now this gets pressed for 10 minutes with 10 pounds pressure. I don't want it to all go wonky and fall on the floor. I will bring you back in 10 minutes time. And it gets removed from the mold and rewrapped for the first time. I think I might have said 10 minutes. I was wrong. It is 10 pounds pressure for 15 minutes. That time period just expired. And now, I'll try to get it out of there, turn it and rewrap it. It's fairly solid, I guess. So I'm going to break it apart, turning it. Still feel feels quite warm. Now it goes back in the mold once again, and this time it will be at 14 pounds of pressure for a half hour. I'm always leery doing this part of it. I've never had a disaster. I just keep thinking there's going to be a disaster someday turning one of these. Oh. There's on the cheesecloth. Okay. Now I will put 14 pounds of weight on it and bring you back in a half hour. Well, it's been 30 minutes. If you hear some loud noises in the background, we've got the beginning of a thunder and lightning storm here right now. Seem to have a lot of them this year. Nothing severe, but we had one yesterday. We've had 2 or 3 prior to that. Now the cheese once again comes out of the mold, is turned and rewrapped, and then it goes back once again at 14 pounds of pressure, this time for 2 hours. So I will bring you back in 2 hours' time. 14 pounds of pressure for the next 2 hours. Time for the final unwrapping. Oh, unwrapping and turning. That was a 4-pound weight that hit the counter there. And the next pressing is for 12 hours. At 15 pounds of pressure, so you add 1 additional pound. But the sad part about that is it finishes at 4 a.m. and I probably will get up at 4 a.m. to start the brining. I don't think it would hurt it if I waited until I normally get up at 7. I more than likely will get up at 4 a.m. Speck of something there. That is that. I will see you at 4 a.m. when it's time to start the brining. Well, good morning, everybody. It's 4 a.m. Something I didn't think I would say very often. See if I can't get this off here without dumping things everywhere. final unwrapping. It has come together quite nicely. There's no more cracks and holes and things anyway. Now I'll get the brine. The brine is icy cold. It's been in the fridge all this time. I don't know if it would float if it was just plain water or not, but because of the amount of salt in there, it floats. And you save a little bit of the salt to put on top of it. That way I guess you don't have to keep flipping it over. Now it goes back in the refrigerator in another 12 hours. And that is the end of the process, but I'll show you in 12 hours time what we do next. Another 12 hours has gone by and the cheese has been floating in the brine for 12 hours. I had a little extra sleep after 4 o'clock this morning. Now begins the aging process. For the first week, the cheese will be in the cheese refrigerator at a temperature of 50 to 55 degrees Fahrenheit. Right now it says to pat it dry. Not quite sure what the purpose of the first week in the cheese refrigerator might be, because after it has been in the cheese refrigerator for a week, it comes out and spends about 3 weeks at room temperature, and that's when the eyes, the holes in the cheese should develop. And it's supposed to be at 80 to 85% humidity. So the way to do that is to put it in a sealed plastic food grade container. Probably can't see down inside. Yeah, I guess you can see somewhat down inside of that. Drag you all over the place here. I have one of the cheese boards that I use to keep it up off the bottom if it should expel moisture, and a cheese mat so that it won't stick to the cheese board. This goes in, the lid will go on, and it will go in my cheese refrigerator, 50 to 55 degrees for a week. You take it out every day, turn it, and wipe it with a cheesecloth that is just barely damp with salt water. That will prevent any molds from growing on it and whatever. And it says not to get the cheese wet, so the cloth, I guess, the idea is supposed to be practically dry but damp, and that is done once a day for 7 days. So I don't know if I may show that once, I guess, during the week. And anyway, I'll certainly bring you back in a week's time when it comes out for its next part of the aging process. Well, it is now a week later. I've been turning the cheese once a day and wiping it with a barely damp cheesecloth that's been soaked in saltwater solution. And I guess it probably shows decently on the video here, but what has happened is that it has turned a creamy yellow color. It was much whiter a week ago. Well, now the process is you bring it out to room temperature. Keep seeing these little things on the surface of the cheese. I can get rid of them. You bring it out to room temperature, 68 to 74 degrees, I think it said, and continue the process of turning it once a day and wiping it for 3 weeks. And during that 3 weeks, it should swell slightly. That's when it starts to form the eyes, the bubbles inside of the cheese, if I'm actually going to get any this time. So if I can tell that it has started to swell, I will show that to you. If not, we'll be back in 3 weeks' time for the next part of the process here. Oh, it's been 1 week since I took the cheese out of the cheese fridge, and it's been at room temperature and has been wiped down every day with the salt water solution. No idea if it's forming any of those eyes or bubbles inside, but it has amazed me. It's completely changed its shape. You look back or think back to the last clips there, the shape of the cheese. It has sort of shrunk down and widened out. And the texture of the cheese is much softer than it used to be. It bounces back when you press on it a little bit. I don't know what it's doing, but it's doing something. It's more the shape that I thought it would be using that Edam mold that I used. And it didn't come out of the mold shape that way, but it's reshaping itself. You see these dark spots. It's just places where there's a little bit of a divot or whatever in the surface of the cheese, and the mold that forms on it that I'm wiping off every day with the salt water gets down in those little crevices, and it's almost impossible to get them out, but there's nothing to be concerned about, I don't think. So I don't know if I'll leave it out for 2 more weeks or not, but I'll go another week anyway and see what I think. And it's made a nice yellow golden sort of color, looking quite nice. Well, this clip is being taken 4 days after the previous clip, and as you can see, it has started to swell. Actually, it started to swell the very next day after I took that last clip, and I've been cleaning it and turning it every day since then. But this is just about what it looked like the first day on this particular side. The other side, when I turn it over, it swells, but not as much as this one is swelling, at least not yet. When I finish cleaning it and turn it over to clean the other side, the weight of the cheese will cause that to shrink down again. So I don't know if we're getting eyes or holes, but we're definitely getting swelling. Well, I'm 5 days, or no, 4 days, I guess, short of the 3 weeks. But I finally figured out what they mean in the instructions, which you would let it go for 2 to 3 weeks at room temperature. It's just stopped doing the expanding thing, you know, the bubble that I showed you coming up in the middle of it. So it is the culture that was causing it to produce those gases has now run its course. So it's time to put it in the cheese refrigerator at 45 degrees, which has meant that I've had to already adjusted the temperature in my cheese cave fridge because it was running warmer than that. Actually, this is the coldest I've ever ran a cheese. The instructions say that you could expect it to become rounder. Well, mine certainly became rounder. It's a completely different cheese than when I first brought it out at room temperature. It's amazed me the amount that it has changed. I've weighed it, and it weighs exactly 3 pounds. I was expecting something closer to 4, but I got a 3-pound cheese. You can see little dark areas here. I believe those are bubbles, eyes down below the surface of the cheese. Those are areas where there aren't any cheese. So hopefully it's also got some in the center. The process now would be to put it in the cheese fridge at 80% humidity, which would mean sealing it in a container. Turning it says several times a week, keeping it at 45 degrees for at least 3 months. I'm not going to be, you continue washing the rind whenever you thought it was necessary. I'm not doing that. As you can see, it's sitting on plastic, and it's going to be vacuum sealed. Something new to me, which I discovered that a lot of cheesemakers are doing, rather than wax the cheese or continue to wash the rind, you can vacuum seal it. I've done that to the Gouda that I have in production, and that seems to be working quite well. I just made this sealing bag. And hopefully I'll get this right first stab. If I don't, I'll get to trash the bag and go at it all over again, I guess. Okay, vacuum seal. First time I tried this, it didn't work for some reason, so I set it up again, and it's definitely doing a better job this time. I couldn't have had the plastic in there, right? There we go. It's extracted all of the air, and now it's sealing the bag. And it has finished sealing. Yeah. And that is what it has. I don't know if this is the right thing to do or not. Now you can see where the holes are inside. It has pulled the cheese down to the making little sort of divots there. But it's all right. It's what I'm going to do with it anyway. It will now go in the cheese fridge for 3 months, and I'll show you what it's like when I open it and slice it in 3 months' time. Thank you very much for watching. I'm now going to try to get this very long video uploaded. With my internet connection, I'm expecting this will take close to 2 days to upload. Thank you for watching.